Kia ora, and welcome to the special Patreon podcast coming at you on Tuesday, a day after the Blackcaps lost the T20 World Cup final to Australia. We're going to be chatting through all things Blackcaps and Aotearoa cricket, and this is a Patreon podcast, so big it up to all our patrons who support the Niche Case on the regular and contribute and just like be a part of our mission to provide Aotearoa sporting coverage and broadcasting Aotearoa sporting excellence. But this podcast is up on the YouTube for everyone to see as a little Patreon preview. So if you do get your taste buds tickled by this Blackcaps kōrero, we do this every Monday or Tuesday for our Patreon whānau. So not only do you support the Niche Case, support our mission in broadcasting Aotearoa sporting excellence, you also get extra podcasts as well, and you can, submit questions, ideas, all that good stuff. And obviously the Blackcaps, well, there's still going to be a lot of Blackcaps. We're coming into summer, so these podcasts will still revolve mainly around the Blackcaps probably. But if our Patreon community has any other topics, ideas, Kiwi sports things that you want us to discuss, hit us up and we'll talk our way through those just in a longer format early in the week. So we do the Patreon podcast early in the week. We do the variety show, which is a mix and match smorgasbord early in the week as well. And then we come back later on the week for a big old niche cast chatting through Kiwi sports as well. So plenty of podcast coverage. And this is just a Patreon preview. So this is what you can come to expect every Monday, sometimes Tuesday, as we're doing now for our Patreon whānau. Wobbly Wildcard. It was good to take some time after that loss to let some thoughts simmer. And I have settled in a very broad perspective, a lot of gratitude, a lot of like forecasting thoughts, a lot of deep reflection on what I believe is a key Blackcap cycle. From the 2019 World Cup or just before, just around that time, to here we are now, 3 major tournaments, and the Blackcaps made the final of all 3 tournaments. Thus, I believe that Aotearoa is the best cricket nation in the world. Those are kind of some broader ideas that I have. You want to get into the nitty-gritty of the final, and I want you to walk us through just your vibe of that final. To me, it just seemed like one of those games. Aotearoa is the best cricket nation in the world. Let's just say that. However, as Kiwi sports fans, as Kiwi people, we all know that in every sport except for rugby, if Australia play their best and New Zealand plays their best, Australia are probably going to win. It's just how it is in Trans-Tasman sport. We all know it. Like, no Trans-Tasman niggle. We just know that is the reality. And that's kind of what happened here. I also have thoughts of like appreciation for Australia. Just what they like, the Justin Langer stuff or before the tournament, Davey Warner up against the ropes. He's the player of the tournament. Like, it was just some good vibes around Australia, but we won't go too deep into that narrative. But this is how my mixed emotions around this final. But your reflections on the final specifically before I think we do open it up and into some broader reflections. But on the final specifically, personally, it just felt like Australia were the better team, better execution in all aspects. And that's what happens when Australia plays to their best of their ability. Like, to be honest, that's what it is. How did you kind of reflect on that final Monday morning?
Yeah, similar ideas, I think, to yourself there. Even towards the appreciation for Australia, I think it was a really weird tournament because Australia are the big bullies of cricket, and everyone knows this. But they weren't at the 2020 World Cup. Like, they rolled in and they'd just been smoked by Bangladesh in a series, which, it wasn't their top team. Same as when we lost there, wasn't our top team. And I think that's an Australian cricket thing, is like, they have the Big Bash. The Big Bash is amazing. The Big Bash is, whether it's like standard of play, quality, quite as good as the IPL, I don't know. I think there's a case to be made, I reckon. But definitely I consider the Big Bash like far more enjoyable as a viewing spectacle for the fans and everything than the IPL is. So like they're onto a beautiful thing there. However, I think like the Aussie cricket mentality is often that's where 2020 stays. Like the Big Bash is the 2020 stuff, and guys like Steve Smith, even David Warner, who I remember him getting a start in 2020. He's called up out of the blue a little bit. The rest is bloody history, unfortunately. But like these guys don't actually play a massive amount of 2020 cricket. They sort of treat the international stuff like Big Bash All-Star things. They'll schedule 2020 series, and the Blackcaps have been on the end of these series at the same time as they're doing other stuff. I think there's even a series against them again coming up this summer. I've got a feeling where we're playing a 2020 team that is not like concurrent with their what we've just seen at the World Cup there. So like they don't take it anywhere near as seriously, I don't think, as basically all of the other top nations do, until they come to this World Cup, and then they call up all the big guns, and then when they do, everyone's like, well, David Warner's out of form. What's Mitchell Marsh batting at 3 for? And Matthew Wade, why is he in the team? And all these questions, like why is Steve Smith so far down the order? And like the fact is they they finally took it seriously for a tournament, and everyone just underestimated them. It was weird. And then I guess they lost that. I think it was their first game, wasn't it, against England? They lost. If not their first, then one of their first couple, and that was just sort of like reinforcing this thing that Australia, while they're just not at the level that we normally expect from Australia at big tournaments. And I don't know how it happened, but all these things align just to have Australia as underdogs. But of course, once Australia get to a final against New Zealand, the perennial underdogs, it's no longer the case. And yeah, I just had bad vibes from day one as soon as I saw that Australia had beaten Pakistan. And then when I actually watched how they beat Pakistan, Matthew Wade getting dropped on the boundary and then hitting like 3 straight sixes to close the game out. Like when it just didn't feel promising. And then you got the Devon Conway stuff where he's out, and just say what you want about like a batsman lashing out after their dismissal, but I've seen plenty of international cricket. I've seen plenty of club cricket. It's one thing that's the same at all levels, as batsmen don't like getting out, and they don't always take it very well. It's that's just cricket in general. So like the fact that he broke his hand punching a wooden bat that he was holding in his other hand, so it's not like he was punching a brick wall or anything that didn't have any give, with gloves on. The fact that happened and broke his hand, that's just a freak incident as far as I'm concerned. Like that's nothing against like, Devon Conway's got an anger problem or something that we had no idea. That's just a freak accident. That could have happened to anybody, and it shouldn't. And it most like I reckon 90% of the time you punch your bat, you don't break your hand, especially if you're wearing gloves. But like that just adds to the tallying up sort of bad vibes there. And then we lost the toss, of course, which I don't think was a defining factor that people are saying, but it certainly didn't help. Regardless of like the dew on the wicket or any of those things, like the main point is that I think the Blackcaps are just a better chasing team with the bat than they are a setting a total first team, which is not ideal. So all these things just kind of added up to where I didn't necessarily expect. Plus, also I didn't expect I thought coming into the tournament, Blackcaps make the semi-final. They've done good. We had a brilliant moment in the semi-final as they beat England. That was taking them above expectations. Bummer that they lost a final, but as I'll chuck out on my variety show thing as well, it just doesn't have the same disappointment as like the World Cup finals that we've seen in the past. Like 2015 World Cup, they made it to the final, got embarrassed by Australia, like just absolutely smashed. And it sort of felt like maybe they didn't deserve to be there after all, if you're going to lose by that much in a final. 2019, they should have won, certainly shouldn't have lost, and it just felt like they were robbed. So like one final feels like they're exposed. One final, it feels like they've been cheated out of it. Like not cheated by, cheated by fate, not cheated by anything like nefarious. But, this one, it just felt like a good game between two good teams, and ultimately Australia got the jump. Kane Williamson said they got like momentum earlier in their innings and just didn't let up. Like, the Blackcaps, I think, set a very good total. I've seen a lot of people saying like, oh, they're 10, 20 runs short or whatever. I think asking to score 190 in a World Cup final is a lot. I think 172 was an excellent total, definitely above what I thought they would get, and also definitely defendable. It just came down to whether they could get some early wickets, and they couldn't. And when they did get one wicket, in comes Mitchell Marsh, smacks his first ball for six, which is unreal. Like just the level of hitting, the consistency, the power those dudes had from like basically ball one. Warner paced himself a little bit more. He was a bit more selective, but when he chose to hit, he hit it a long way and he hit it very hard. And I think it's easy when a chase plays out that way. It's easy just to feel like we weren't up for it and to miss the point of just how like what a tightrope walk that was, the batting that Australia showed. So, I mean, when you get two guys who bat like that, what are you going to do? It's a 2020 that normally is going to win you most chases. Two guys scoring 50 plus at a quick clip. So I think the game itself was closer than it appears to look at the scorecard now. It's just the Blackcaps, just needed one miss hit earlier on from Warner and Marsh, like one of those dudes to sky one and be caught on the boundary or something and open up an end, and it's a different story. I mean, when you got to bring when you're bringing spinners like Santner and Sodhi on in the sort of seventh, eighth over, and they're bowling to new batsmen who have to be a little bit cautious, that's danger zone for the batsman. When you're bringing those spinners on and they're bowling to two set guys who are on like 20 to 30 at quick clips, like that's danger zone for the bowlers. Any spinner's going to struggle in that regard. So it's just didn't get a good enough start to the bowling innings, and that was the difference between the teams, and it just sort of snowballed from there. But I don't think there was a massive amount between the teams, but clearly on performance, Australia were just much the better team in the day, and that's kind of how it goes. You can't really complain when you lose a final like that.
So one note I had from the final was there seemed to be a fine line between bowling into the pitch and bowling short. And I think that's important, because bowling into the pitch was a big trend, a big narrative throughout the tournament. Like just checking Josh Hazlewood's stats for the tournament, 11 wickets for Australia and 15.9 average. Adam Zampa was only slightly better than Hazlewood, 13 wickets at 12. And Hazlewood was kind of just bowling test match line and length. And that is to say that the seamers were trying to dig it into the pitch just to tighten everything up. Bit of nibble, bit of pace variation off the pitch in UAE. And it just seemed, watching the Blackcaps bowl, it seemed like whether it was the pitch, whether it was the execution, or Australians being Australians, because everything I said about Daryl Mitchell, now we know he's, teammates with Marcus Stoinis back in Perth, and him and there was a photo of him and Stoinis.
Yeah, I saw it when they were like 18 or something.
That is ridiculous. Yeah. Almost as glorious as the old Northern Districts under 19 photo where it's got like Trent Bolt, Kane Williamson, Tim Southee, and Trent Bolt's looking like a little rat in the best way possible. So we said that all about Daryl Mitchell. Like, bowl short to Daryl Mitchell, the dude grew up or played cricket in Perth, seen him play square of the wicket, fine, happy days. And then I had memories of Stoinis in New Zealand. Anything slightly short to Stoinis, he literally muscles it. Like, he's not middling the ball. It's just his brute power, his force on like quickly picking up the length and then muscle it to the boundary. That's Mitchell Marsh as well. So it's like, if you overstep that line of trying to bowl into the pitch against the Australian batsman, those deliveries that the idea is to tie up the batsman, those deliveries quickly become half trackers. And those are easier to dispatch for someone like Mitchell Marsh. And to be honest, I don't think a lot of batsmen around the world have that kind of Mitch Marsh, Stoinis ability just to muscle shorter deliveries to the boundary.
Jared Kimber in his newsletter wrote a thing about, I think he started off talking about Matthew Wade, but he mentioned like Stoinis as well and Marsh and like these dudes. And because I think Stoinis he's from Western Australia, but I think he's played a lot of Big Bash for Melbourne as well. Is that right?
He started cricket. He started his first class cricket in Victoria. He moved to Victoria.
Okay, right. So there you go. And got like we know what those Aussie pitches are like, especially compared to the small Kiwi ones, which was held against New Zealand at various points during the tournament for nonsensical reasons. But we know what the Aussie pitches are like not pitches, but the fields are like, but especially the MCG. Like, in the point that Jared Kimber made in his Substack thing was about like dudes like Stoinis and Wade and various others have played an excessive amount of their 2020 cricket at that one ground at the MCG. Boundaries are huge. If you want to hit a six there, you got to absolutely mash the ball. So they've just like supremely powerful dudes. When they hit the ball, they absolutely smash it. And you can see that because when those dudes were, we'll put Mitchell Marsh in the same category. When those dudes were clearing the ropes against New Zealand in that final, it wasn't just like landing on the rope. It wasn't just going a meter over. It was going deep into the stands.
And you mentioned the Australia versus Pakistan. Shout out to our patrons for their collaboration here. Shout out Matt Plunkett. We got Morgan Allen and Baxter Rogers, frequent commenters and idea contributors to the Patreon. Matt Plunkett chucked up the thoughts on role of fielding. Seems to have stepped up with a real manic kind of energy, which helped in the tight, intense soup of this format. That's a great sentence. It's clear that this is a well-drilled side, which has tried to be as best possible to cover all scenarios in the format. And just like goes on to say about the importance of fielding. If you think about Australia versus Pakistan, Hassan Ali drops Matthew Wade at mid-wicket in a dolly of a catch. And so Hassan Ali, you're thinking Pakistani bowler, you're thinking Trent Boult. Trent Boult doesn't really drop catches. In fact, I'd say he's the best bowling catcher in the world.
I would say he's the second best behind Tim Southee.
I'd say different positions.
Different types of catching, but yeah.
Because Southee's the best bowling slip fielder.
He also takes some mean catches on the boundary.
But Trent Boult
will take diving ones.
Trent Boult moving is different. But then who's the other best fielding team?
I'm assuming you're thinking Australia.
It's Australia. So it's like...
Disagree, no.
That's like as Matt Plunkett said, the importance of fielding, that's a key defining factor. And we've said New Zealand's like a fantastic fielding team. That's a defining factor when you're playing Pakistan, when you're playing India, when you're like all these other teams and you go down. If you're playing Bangladesh, West Indies, maybe the Blackcaps can just win a game with their fielding. Against Australia, that's not happening because Australia are fucking good in the fielding. Australia, they do everything the same as New Zealand. It's just like with way more people, everyone's bigger. Like all the stuff we know about Australia, that, as we've said before, it's just like to a different level. But it's kind of that matchup where New Zealand versus Australia, you're getting the same level of fielding. So that advantage is like taken away. And that's where you get into like, okay, now you have to play a perfect game as opposed to like, as we've said numerous times, winning a game on effort, on nous, on intangibles, that kind of decreases. So,
well, I think that goes even further in that argument. I mean, the fielding thing, you can make a decent case there as well. That like England are a very good fielding team, but the fielding was probably the difference in that, you know, those two catches that were dropped and went for six, like it's probably what split the teams on the day. Like the fielding there, and that's high level execution stuff. Like if Johnny Bairstow has not dragged his knee, that's one of the all-time great catches. So he wouldn't have got the catch because he flicked it back into Livingston, but still, like that would have been a legendary piece of fielding. Would have been unfortunately replayed every time we play England alongside Martin Guptill getting run out and Ben Stokes going like this. So just more trauma, but we avoided that one. But like still, that was one of the defining points of that game. Like when the Blackcaps, well, I was going to say throughout this tournament, but it was the same at the ODI World Cup as well.
It's a cycle World Cup. It's a cycle. It's all together. World Test Championship, ODI World Cup, this World Cup. It's the same style, same players-ish, same themes. It's all together.
And that style is to like, they don't go out there being like, we're going to try win this game by scoring 220 in this inning. We're just going to go ballistic and like, they They quickly assess conditions. They decide what is an above average total. They settle for that rather than risking more and ending up with less. They're like, one way or another, we're going to condense this game. We're going to keep it close. We're going to ensure that those fine margins are important, and we're going to back ourselves to, take care of those fine margins. We're going to field well. We're going to suffocate you with those things by turning like twos into ones, by running in hard off the boundary, getting a good throw in, like simple things, along with, not dropping catches and whatever, bowling to plans, all these things. Like this is how the Blackcaps operate in these tournaments. Is why they're very good, because they're just like, we're not going to lose this game. We're going to make you beat us. And if you don't, we win, because sweet as. Against India, that seems to work a dream every time, because India feel a lot of pressure. There's a billion people screaming at them if you have one bad innings in a knockout game, no matter how fickle 2020 cricket may be for an individual performance like that. Rohit Sharma got out against Pakistan. You should be dropped. Everyone's saying this now. You should be dropped. Get out of there. Was one of the great 2020 batsmen, but forget about that. Like, the pressure on those dudes is insane, and they seem to feel it at these big tournaments. I don't think it helps very much. Blackcaps are very good at not feeling pressure, because they turn that pressure into like a mirror and reflect it back at the other team. Against England, I wouldn't say it gave the Blackcaps a major advantage, but I do think it means that when we play England, like against India, it gives the Blackcaps a big advantage. Against someone like England, it levels the game out to where it's very close. And obviously these two teams have had some incredibly close games in recent times. Against Australia, it doesn't matter. You turn the pressure into a mirror, reflect it back at them. They just like punch the mirror, break the glass. It doesn't matter. They don't care. They don't feel the pressure. They go out there expecting to win. They got that sort of Aussie arrogance, but arrogance in a good way, where they just, it doesn't affect them. That's the difference. Like, that's how the Blackcaps progressed through this tournament. Their most important game, and the first most important game, was beating India, because that was the second game of the tournament, basically a knockout to get through. After that, they just had to beat teams they were expected to beat, and they did. Then England in the semi-final, then Australia. It's that progression of how the pressure, like how that style, that Blackcap style sort of operates. Worked perfectly against India, worked good enough against England, didn't work at all against Australia. And I sort of felt like that was going to be the case going in as well. It's another reason why I just felt it wasn't a good matchup. Against India, we're going to get those little advantages. Against Australia, you just know we're not. And if you take that away from the Blackcaps, they can look a little bit toothless, because that is kind of that, and that is that thing. Like, it's the idea about like nullifying the other team's strengths. Like, for some teams, that is cramping up Virat Kohli and making sure you've got a plan to get him out, or targeting individuals like that. For the Blackcaps, it's their team culture that's kind of that important thing. So that's what Australia did. It's not about individual performers who they targeted or anything like that. It's the fact that they, just by being Australian cricketers, kind of nullified the Blackcaps' secret weapon, which is those intangibles. And unfortunately, kind of knew from before ball one, from as soon as they beat Pakistan, kind of knew that the bastards were going to do that, was the problem.
That Aussie vibe is amplified when, like, people are talking shit about them, when there's all this drama,
yeah,
when
exactly.
there's like,
they love a siege mentality.
Then their team culture becomes a massive advantage, because you've got like that Australian team, like, it's still a fucking amazing team, and they have this like that fabric between them, that culture between them that is brewing, saying like, as we all know, no one can think we can do this, blah blah blah. So let's open it up. Let's get a bit broader, because I think it's important to reflect, because we already start into a new cycle. I'm not sure about you, Wildcard. I don't give a fuck about these two 2020s against India.
Three, like, I think, but yeah,
three, like,
I
not
thought
important.
It was 5 until the other day. But I sort of do. I've got a little bit of a when you're I don't know, have you ever done like sprints, like, I don't know, like warm-ups for because one of the things you do in football is everyone likes to do this, because it's the FIFA warm-ups, where you just put like I don't know, 5 or 6 cones in a row, 2 sides, split into 2 sides, run up and down, do your like kicking your heels up, high knees, those kind of just like this dynamic stretches. And then at the end, most teams I've played in will be like, okay, now sprint it out, sort of thing. And you'll sprint out like this, I don't know, 10, 15-meter sprint kind of thing. But you can't stop straight away. You get to the end, you still got a little bit of momentum. You kind of got to just like open your strides and slow down a couple extra steps. That's kind of how I feel coming out of the 2020 World Cup, is I've got to like, I don't know if we'll do any good in these 2020s against India. And I don't know if the Blackcaps themselves will be as motivated as they ordinarily would be for these games. But I've still got a little bit of like rushing momentum that I haven't quite stopped from the 2020 stuff yet. So I don't mind it. Would be nice if they were on a better like time zones though.
I'm like a little bit disgusted that they're playing the T20s
it's stupid straight, because when they announced the squad and it was like, this is the squad for this the Bangladesh stuff and the Pakistan ODIs, I think, then the Pakistan T20s was another squad, then another third squad, like it was sort of one squad, then half and half, and then the World Cup squad and the India's. I just assumed, I think I even wrote this like when I was writing, I just assumed that the 2020s in India were pre-tournament warm-ups. And then I found out after the Pakistan series got cancelled, that wasn't the case. So it's stupid scheduling. Like, it's ridiculous scheduling to play games like 3 days after a World Cup in that format. It's ridiculous. But as I say, I still got a little bit of a head of steam. So
let's consider this an announcement. I will not be writing about the Blackcaps T20 International Series versus India. The wildcard may do, because he seems rather excited. I'm disgusted. However, the point here, wildcard, is that after that T20 series, there is a test series, a World Test Championship test series. And that means we're starting a whole new cycle. Now, first, that new cycle is really interesting because of what's happened in the last cycle, which I'll get into a jiffy, but also it's the next cycle, but everyone's kind of old now. So all the best players are starting to get to the end of their careers, and I'm fascinated by this next cycle to see how it plays out, like see if they can maintain and sustain the excellence, to see how far Ross Taylor goes into the next cycle, like just all these ideas just to see what happens. The last cycle, the Blackcaps are the only team to make the final of all three tournaments. So if I just say that, it gets a bit like, that's a Kiwi thing to say. Oh, but we made the final of all three tournaments. Even though like no one else did it, which is fucking amazing, but it's still like, okay, that's cute. But the Blackcaps actually won something. They won the World Test Championship. So that's just a little notch. And then you get into, well, Australia didn't make the final of the other two tournaments. And then England and India, they were like semi-finalists across other tournaments as well. There's only one team that made the final of all three tournaments, and that is ridiculous. 2019 World Cup, World Test Championship, T20 final. Like, I don't think people like realize how difficult that is, because they're like say England, they have completely different operations, as we've talked about at length. They have completely different operations for white ball and red ball, and they're not as good as New Zealand. New Zealand is excellent across all three formats. There is a massive difference between England, the ODI team, and England, the test team. They're just not in the same competitive realm. New Zealand, every format is the same. It doesn't matter. And you can say, well, it's just Kane Williamson, Tim Sally, Trent Boult. Well, different dudes pop up. Tom Latham, excellent test cricket, excellent ODI cricket. Lockie Ferguson.
Vastly different roles.
Yeah, and Lockie, like, you've got test specialists, you've got white ball specialists, and then you've got the dudes who do everything as well. And I think that is pretty amazing. And that is the foundation of my celebration of the Blackcaps. And it's like, any conditions, they're pretty good. The last cycle was skewed heavily towards playing a lot of cricket in New Zealand, but the World Test Championship final, that was in England. World Cup, ODI World Cup, that was in England, and you're playing against a wide range of opponents. That's why the tournament success are key indicators of a good team, because you're getting every opponent in quick succession. You're getting every condition. Like, pitches vary, locations vary, even within the same country. So you have that in contrast to the Blackcaps in New Zealand. Like, they're like amazing. They bully everyone. Well, we were talking about that idea, the bully Blackcaps. When any team comes to New Zealand, they're going to get fucked up by the Blackcaps. It's just how it is. And we know it. We also had these ideas of like, what's this team going to do overseas? Well, this team made the final of all three competitions, all three tournaments overseas. They won the Test Championship overseas. What's the most adverse conditions for the Blackcaps? It's, spinny type of conditions in the UAE. Well, they made the final. Like this is
on a Test series against Pakistan there a couple of years ago as well. Won a Test series against England just before the Test Championship final.
Exactly. So, and now, there's like, I think I mentioned how like Neil Wagner only plays Tests, as Matt Henry isn't a T20 bowler. Like, so there's like all these bits and pieces that come in, and it's like we've got enough depth to be competitive in all three formats around the core. And if we open it up just to forecast forward a bit, this World Test Championship cycle starts with a massive challenge, India in India. And what do? We just pull up Will Somerville and Ajaz Patel out of like relative oblivion to go to spinning conditions. And this is the type of depth. I'm not saying Will Somerville and Ajaz Patel are going to bowl India out. I'm just saying this is how you get competitive to do what the Blackcaps have done. You need to have a certain level of depth. And it's just a fascinating juncture, because here I am reflecting on something that I don't think a lot of people are drawing appreciation from, because everyone wants the winners. And you mentioned Ben Stokes before, just quickly, like, shout out to Ben Stokes, Kiwi Ben Stokes. He's had the moments, right? He's had the moments. He's had the moments at the World Cup, the Ashes. Like, you watch Ben Stokes in those moments, and like, it's hard not to fucking get emotional, because you just imagine yourself in that moment, like banging the boundary against Australia in the Ashes in England, home conditions, and you're just like going nuts. Like, that's amazing. That's moments. The Blackcaps as a team, it's kind of more cumulative. It's like over a period of time, we sustain a level of competitiveness, as we've said, intangibles, going through tournaments, all that stuff. And you do that. So like, that's appreciation for all of that. And now the next cycle begins with a Test series in India, which is really tricky, really challenging, but I see it as like the perfect, maybe like next level, stepping out of this cycle of bonkers excellence, finals in all three major tournaments. What's the, like, how do you level up your challenge? Well, you go to India for some Test cricket. Let's just do that. Let's see how we go. And that's what's next. Like, fuck that T20 series. This Test series is where it's at. So I'm going to be taking a break. You're going to be writing about T20 cricket, and then we get into World Test Championship.
Yeah. Well, we had this Test Championship, like start the Test Championship with a series away in India. Go for it. Like, we had a series in Australia in the last T20, last Test cycle, where we got absolutely munted. So we can afford one write-off and still make the final. Like, that's been proven. Just got to have to, like, no margin for error when we go to places like Bangladesh or South Africa. I don't know if we've got, I haven't actually looked at the things recently, but because the thing you said about making the final of the three straight ones, because you did that, the bit that you spoke about there, you put that in the Substack mailer on Monday. And the other thing that I noticed about that, which goes towards the idea of just like people don't quite appreciate how difficult it is. Like, we know that world cricket is kind of dominated by three teams. It's Australia, it's India, it's England, and then it's everybody else. Like, the Blackcaps not only have been amongst that trio for like each of the last three, so they're the only team that's been, like, looking at this, the top four on the standings of the Test Championship, the semi-finalists at the ODI and T20 World Cups. Pakistan are the only other team from outside those three teams and New Zealand to have made a top four in any of them in that last cycle. That was in this 2020 World Cup, and they lost in the semis. But they're the only other teams who have split that. Like if England, Australia, and India are just going to make semi-finals or top fours of all of these tournaments, there's only room for one other team. New Zealand's been there every time. India obviously didn't get out of the group stage in these 2020s because New Zealand beat them. That's crazy. Like it's not just that. It's not just that the Blackcaps are hanging amongst them. It's that they're the only team who seem to be able to hang amongst them across all formats. Like just that's nuts. That's kind of crazy, especially when you then think about why those three teams dominate. It's the history, the legacy that they've got in the sport going back 100+ years. It's the just the big population benefits that they have combined with the financial benefits that they have. Like, you know, Bangladesh have I'd assume Bangladesh is probably the second most populous test playing nation, but they don't have the wealth in their cricket that, you know, Australia or England, especially England and India probably have, nor the power and the within the like legislative type of side of things as well. Like there's a reason those three teams dominate, and I say there's a reason. There are many reasons why those three teams dominate, like many different areas of what it takes to be a powerful cricketing nation, where those three teams are at the like 1, 2, and 3 in some order. And then it's like them and everybody else. Like it's not just one thing. It's not just they have the most people. It's that there's many aspects where they are the dominant three. And the Blackcaps are somehow just hanging amongst them with no money, probably the smallest test playing population, and like a legacy which we've been playing test cricket a long time. But remember, the Blackcaps went like 26 years or something without ever, before they won their first test, like from their first test match that they played before they actually won a test match. You know, it's a lot longer than Bangladesh took, a lot longer than Sri Lanka took. We've got like a great legacy, but it's a legacy that's not necessarily revolved around winning stuff. And here they are hanging in there with the powerhouses. That is like, that's just crazy to me to think about, like how the levels of consistency and performance that are required to be able to do that, to overcome all the hurdles that they start, like the deficit that they start with, the handicap to begin with. It's that's crazy to me.
In summary of that, there's no way Joe Root can be as good as Kane Williamson. Because Kane Williamson...
He's got a lot more help, doesn't he? He's got a lot more help.
No, Kane Williamson's the best. Like, he is literally, and I've got this stat for the variety show, he was New Zealand's best batsman in all 3 events. Joe Root doesn't play 2020 cricket. So that takes him out of 2020 cricket. So then it's like Kane Williamson and Virat Kohli. Steve Smith is a bit more inconsistent. Like he just didn't have the, I don't have the same T20 vibe as I have with Williamson and Kohli. But it's like, how can you make a case that Joe Root's a better batsman if he doesn't play one of the formats where the other guys excel? And that's like, that sums up England versus Aotearoa as well. One last
From
question.
that logic, Babar Azam might have to slide up ahead of him in the...
Exactly. Like big trend of 2021 is like just enjoying England capitulate. Like they're all worried about the Ashes and everything in England cricket is just being like torn to shreds. It's quite enjoyable. One last question. Kane Williamson and Brendan McCullum. How do you view each of those characters now? Because I think what I'm getting around to is reframing these major results under the Kane Williamson umbrella. Because what I used to do was go back to 2015. And then we're getting into the more McCullum stuff. But under Williamson, 2019 and 2021, massive years, all 3 tournaments, success, finals, winning, whatever. How like, obviously I'm all aboard Kane Williamson. Kane Williamson's he's a god to me. He's actually a Buddha to me. He's a deity, but he's got that mindful spiritual nature to him. So he's a Buddha to me. And
he's a bodhisattva is, I think, the term for the enlightened being.
He's my Buddha. Like,
well, that's just another, yeah, okay.
No, he's the one. You know, he's not just like another one of us enlightened beings. He is the one. He is the Buddha. He is the guy at the top, at the head of the tree. Head of the tree is like mixing things, but so I'm all aboard Williamson. I love Williamson. How do you view that? Do you like, yeah, just how do you view Kane Williamson versus McCullum? Maybe like to frame it as like just impact, performance, leadership, whatever it was, because you go back a few years, Brendan McCullum's like the god. And Williamson said, yo, sweet, I'm going to go a couple steps further.
Yeah. There's a saying that if you meet the Buddha, like walking down the path, you should kill him. Which I think is a metaphor for like, it's what I'm thinking of when you say, no, he's the Buddha. Like, I think the idea there is not to have like, it's like an anti-Buddhist thing to have, what do you call it? Like to put people on pedestals and stuff like that.
What's it? I'm not killing Williamson if I meet him barefoot at Papamoa on the beach.
Yeah, walking the dog or something.
I'm not shanking Kane Williamson. You know, I can't.
I know that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm sticking with the Bodhisattva bit. Like he's an enlightened being, a path to follow. McCullum wasn't that at all. McCullum was like manic energy, and but I mean, McCullum got the ball rolling. That was a really important phase of Blackcaps cricket, was to be like, this whole underdog thing doesn't have to be an excuse. It can be a reason. Like it can be a something that we find empowering, and let's just like be the cricketers that we are. We're not going to try play like someone else. We're not. Well, they did. They have done for a while, but like this was the point where you stop that. Like let's find out what it means to be Kiwi cricketers. Play the natural games, those kind of things, and then the fact that they had success at the World Cup, and success that like really translated to the rest of the country as well, like because it was because they were hosting it or co-hosting it, playing all their home games up until the final where they got smashed. Like I think that crossed over to the wider public as well in a way that was really important. The thing I said at the start was about how the 2015 World Cup, you sort of got the feeling like they got exposed a little bit in the final. Like they were clearly an inferior team to a very good Australian team, but still, like it didn't feel like they were really in the game for longer than maybe the first couple balls, and then McCullum got bowled, and like that was kind of maybe symbolic in a way. But it was, I like, how do I put this better? It maybe didn't feel sustainable what they did. Like they were, I mean, part of that is because you had guys like Ryan Elliott, Daniel Vittori retire very soon after. McCullum himself retired not like a year or two later. Like part of it is that. But it also, I felt like a team that was punching above their weight, which was like a great, incredible like roller coaster to be on at that time. But it wasn't like the Kane Williamson era is the one where it became, they're not just like, they're not punching above their weight. Like this is their actual weight class. This is where they belong. They're proving this time after time after time that it's not a fluke when the Blackcaps go deep into these tournaments anymore. They're not just like happy to be there anymore. They're winning stuff. They're beating really good teams. They're proving themselves. Like I think that's a Kane Williamson thing, is just that level of consistent. Like, but I also don't know if that happens without. Maybe it does, but I don't know, and I can't say for sure that would have happened without what McCullum got rolling. The ball that McCullum got rolling in the first place. So, I think maybe you need one leading to the other. Like it's a process. It's a I don't know, it's part of the recipe, and the key ingredient is like they had to do this kind of like almost ritualistic thing with the McCullum era, and it was really only a couple of years at the end there when he was captain where this was the case. Like the start of McCullum's captaincy, he was a villain. He'd like ousted Ross Taylor, and people were holding that against him, and et cetera, but by the end, when he sort of got that sort of like that free reign and sort of empowered the team, I think it kind of broke off a lot of, I don't know, psychic damage that had been building up of the Blackcaps just feeling like they could only ever be underdogs. He kind of like broke those shackles and allowed Williamson to then take the team further. Because I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever that the team is better now than it was in 2015. I think that 2019 team would smoke the 2015 team. The one thing they didn't really have is McCullum himself, like that, not so much as a captain, but as a blaster from ball one. Especially because they were struggling to find a second opener. They wanted Colin Munro to be that guy going into 2019. But yeah, I don't know if one happens without the other. I think Williamson is a better leader for having played under McCullum. If that makes sense, it makes perfect sense to me. So that's kind of how I view that the kind of, I don't think, because a lot is made of like Martin Crowe being a mentor to guys like Taylor and Guptill, and there's like a very direct lineage thing there going on. Because of that, you get that sort of master and teacher thing, and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker kind of vibes. It doesn't feel like that specifically, like Williamson was a protege of McCullum or anything, other than being a teammate and a friend and someone, mutual respect and all this, and playing for the same team, fighting for the same cause, whatever. You don't feel like his captaincy is a direct follow-on, but I think in a wider sense, the McCullum Blackcaps have led to the Williamson Blackcaps,
It's a very nuanced answer. I was looking for a bit more of a dramatic, like, Kane Williamson's my Buddha, that type of answer, but didn't get it. But that's okay. We will wrap up the Patreon podcast there. We'll crack into the variety show. And yeah, Cowabunga. Cheer, cheer.